Hello and welcome back to Wellness Discussions with me and Jackie. Today is episode 3, and in today's episode, we're going to be discussing the influence of Dr. Ray Peat on our health and wellness journeys. Specifically, he had a massive influence on my journey as well as Jackie's, and we just wanted to pay tribute to him because he passed at the end of November of this year. So we thought that it would be meaningful to do a quick episode on what he meant to us or the influence. We're not going to go deep into any of his theories or really unpack a lot of the technical details of his work. I will leave some resources in the description box below. So this video is more just discussing why we are big fans of Dr. Ray Peat's work, where it came into our lives, and what it means to us. So welcome to episode 3. Right, Jackie, do you mind starting us off with an explanation or just the beginning of how Dr. Ray Peat has influenced your health and your well-being journey?
Yeah, sure. So something that really struck out to me about the way Dr. Ray Peat's work approaches health is this concept of you cannot address your health in parts. So, for example, your hormone health is not separate from your cardiovascular health, is not separate from your digestive health, is not separate from your mental health. You know, our body operates as a system, and all of these different parts are always communicating with each other. And if we want to find optimal health, we need to give our bodies the tools to support that system and thereby ensure optimal functioning of each individual part, which is a completely different approach than trying to find these sort of reductionist treatment protocols to address a specific issue in the body. And that was quite a game changer for me in the way I approach my health, because I realized I need to address multiple areas of my health simultaneously to really find true health.
I love that. What comes up for me is this thought of like when we go see specialists or when we focus on health, often it will be like treat this one area, but a lot of the time at the expense of like the other body parts. So it's fine. Okay, now we fixed this. You know, maybe I fixed my skin, but I fixed my skin at the expense of my hormonal health or something like that. And a lot of the time health is that, and we are holistic beings.
Yeah, so I think just approaching health from that different perspective in and of itself has changed the way I make decisions for my health. And I think that's the most profound thing, because it's not about a dietary protocol or a prescription when it comes to Dr. Ray Peat's work, which is sort of the approach I took for many years, following a lot of different health gurus whose health advice was really centered around yes and no lists, or eat this, don't eat this, or follow this protocol. Whereas I find Dr. Ray Peat's work is more about an approach, and it's individualistic. It's not these are the rules and you follow these and you'll be healthy. It's more about encouraging this curiosity towards our health and helping us find a path that we can apply certain principles to our health and find what works for us, instead of being this yes no prescriptive definition of what leads to optimal health.
For sure. And I think that's why it's often referred to as the Dr. Ray Peat inspired approach to health. Like, it's not a diet. It's not like he was like, I am this, I stand for this, follow my 5 rules. You know, here's my book of how to be healthy in 10 steps. So we all refer to it as being inspired by his work and by his contributions and by the information that he puts out there, rather than by a list of things that he was like, okay, if you do these 5 things, you'll be healthy. And of course, it's always tempting. Like, it's so tempting to be like, people will often ask me like, enter in whatever, and then be like, is that healthy? And I'm like, you know, like, there's so much more to that. I can't just be like yes or no. And I think that's a great influence from him, is that it isn't just, yes, this is healthy, no, that's unhealthy, here's 5 ways to be healthy. It is a little bit more tough because we look at the person as a whole. And I'm pretty sure that that's also the benefit that you add to people as a practitioner, is that someone's going to come to you and know that you're going to look at them as a holistic being. Like, you're going to make connections about a lot of it thanks to Dr. Ray Peat's work, and really make a lot of different connections, as opposed to like, oh, you have this deficiency, that means you should take this one other thing, which might not be addressing like the whole big picture of the person.
Exactly. I'm so grateful for coming across his work as I've started working with clients, because that approach to health has really inspired the way I work with people. And as I've said in a previous episode we did, my goal when working with people is to empower them to understand more about their bodies and to understand how they can support their bodies. And that really is thanks to a lot of the work that Dr. Repeats put out there in terms of helping us understand our bodies better, helping us understand what health really is and how we can support that.
And how things operate in a context. So, like, I think a big one, and I'm not going to get technical about this, but people often demonize sugar or having sugary things. And again, it's about the context in which it operates. It's not sugar is good or sugar is bad. It's sugar in context. It's exercise in context. It's a lot of things in context and in that holistic beings. We can thank him for allowing us to have that more sort of holistic approach to our well-being. And I know that it made a big difference for me, rather than to just try to supplement like a few key areas and think, okay, I'm going to be healthy if I address like these little individual things, as opposed to trying to address my whole well-being. All right. So in terms of his influence for me, slightly differently, just because I don't have as much of an interest in the super technical parts of nutrition as you do, is I think a big part of it was, so I found him through the hormonal health stuff. The first big thing that I read was PMS to menopause. And I think that it wasn't a new concept, but he brought it to light for me so much, especially as someone who's done research, someone who's studied research, when he speaks about the influence of different big parties and money in terms of who funds what research and therefore what becomes health trends. Like, I think we all intuitively know this, but yet lots of parts in my journey, I was like, almost oblivious to it. It's like the mainstream says this is healthy, and then even though I do know like how the back of research works, you kind of still go along with it. And his work really got me to question the motives behind why certain things were funded, why certain things are pushed as healthy. And it's not like one body does this. Like, this happens all over the world. There's so many examples of this. And his big one that I read about was obviously estrogen. But it allowed me to start really thinking in terms of, does this person that I'm taking this advice from, or this person trying to sell me something, be it a book or a supplement or whatever, are they doing that from a genuine space of believing that this is the best thing? Not for me as an individual, they don't know me, but where is that coming from? Like, what led to that research? Who's benefiting from that research? Is it really about the health, or is it about supply and demand of a specific product in the market? Is it about what is going to drive revenue for a particular company? Or is this about just the research that was done? And to start looking at who's doing the research, who am I trusting, as opposed to just trusting everybody in the health field, I started to become a little bit more particular about whose information I wanted to take in, just based off of things that he highlighted, where it's sort of maybe questionable decisions of things that came to be in the health world as a result of different motives.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you look at the health space through that principle. And I actually used to work for a hospital group. That was one of my jobs. I was a statistical analyst there. And it was such an interesting job because I really enjoyed working with all the clinical data. But something that really struck out to me is how a lot of our medical industry is driven by profits. And it's quite disappointing, because you realize that oftentimes health is actually sacrificed for the purpose of growth and profits. And that's not to say that I don't think there's really good people working in pharmaceutical companies and working in health research who have our best interests at heart. But we really have to understand that pharmaceutical companies, private health companies, they're all listed companies who need to satisfy shareholders. They need to satisfy shareholders, they need to make a profit, and those lines do get blurred, unfortunately. So it really is up to us to question those things, use that information to make the best decisions for our health. And sometimes I think people think this is sort of conspiracy theory territory, but when you understand just business, basic business principles, you realize it's not conspiracy theory. It's just about understanding the way the world works and trying to navigate your health in the context of that world.
Exactly. It's not, for me, it's not about like saying, oh, this is bad, like this company is bad or whatever. It's just about starting to understand that things are nuanced. And when you look at research, there's always limitations to that. We always have to understand that there's pretty much no study that is void of a limitation. And I think what I liked about Dr. Ray Peat's work is it reminds us to question that instead of just saying like, okay, I read the title of this article, therefore X equals Y. And it's not as simple as X equals Y, especially in women's research, because I mean, we know now that a lot of the things that were pushed as mainstream health were only studied on men and not on women. And then we would take that as healthy, but it wasn't studied on the female body. So I'm not gonna go into that any further, but I think it is just important to have a questioning mindset to whose information do you decide to trust, and to also understand that it's not all good or all bad. It's just about taking that information, again, as a holistic view and the understanding that there might be different things driving that. And one of the funny examples I had, this ties back to our first episode on Progest-E. I remember the gynecologist telling me like, okay, we can supplement progestin, synthetic version of progesterone. And I asked her like, why would you advocate for that over a bioidentical one? And then she said, oh no, it's just because there's a lot of research backing this. I'm like, yeah, obviously, because someone paid for that. So there is an abundance of research showing that one, because someone decided they wanted to put that product on the market and they wanted to make sure that they could back it up. So they funded that research and said, we know exactly about the dosages and the this and the that. And you can find that stuff with the bioidentical one. It's just not as readily available because people didn't think it was a good project to fund. It didn't make financial sense for that. So that doesn't mean that it's not, like, that doesn't mean we should be taking, in my opinion, the synthetic one because someone funded more research there. It just means we have to look a little harder to the people who bothered to fund or to do the research on the bioidentical one.
Yeah, and you'll see in a lot of Dr. Ray Peat's articles, he'll cite studies that were done years ago, in the 50s, in the 60s, before a lot of the pharmaceutical companies really boomed. And so that I find really interesting to look at that research. And I love the way he writes about how sort of he had the before and after the pharmaceutical influence, how you started seeing different trends in research. And that's something I really appreciate about his articles as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think I have a lot of respect for people who are willing to take that professional criticism and backlash. And I know that he did get, if I remember correctly, a lot of backlash in terms of academia and lecturing and research when you start to push back against what sort of research is being done or what's being ignored. And I think that it doesn't mean that I have to necessarily agree with everything someone says, but a part of me kind of lights up a little when I hear somebody is pushing back against the norm, trying to bring new ideas or highlight things, and that they're willing to almost stake their professional reputation, their income, their, whatever future career on the fact that they ethically believe that it's important to push certain things. And I feel that throughout his career, Dr. Ray Peat definitely did that.
Yeah, and like we said, he does that in a nuanced way. It's not about this is right, this is wrong.
Yeah.
It's and I think that's why I think his work will hold, way past his passing, because it's not a fad. It's not a fad about saying, oh, this is the latest diet trend. It's an approach to thinking about things, to thinking about health, to thinking about well-being, about what holistic well-being actually means. And so that's why I think his legacy will definitely live on as we continue to understand his work more and more.
I think if you read anything from him, like his books, or you watch a podcast, or you don't watch a podcast, you listen to a podcast, you watch a YouTube video with him, he doesn't come across as egotistical. He doesn't seem like overly defensive about his stuff. He's like, here's the information. Do with it what you will. And I really like that, because you can see he doesn't feel the need to like force you to subscribe to his ideas. It's like, here's the information. His website looks like it was made in 1995. Like it's really old school, and it's just about what I gather is putting good information out there. And if people want to do something with it, that's great. He does have some thoughts on marketing, which probably explains why it always isn't that easy to find his stuff. Thankfully, social media and lots of other people have brought to light his work. Otherwise, maybe you and I wouldn't have found it. For the most part, I find that he's very consistent in his approach to things, and although he's very open to new information as well. So it's not about like being stuck in your ways. So there's that openness with consistency.
Yeah, and I think that's because he really has that sort of guiding principle. So his foundational principle is that energy and structure are interdependent at every level. And when you start thinking about health through that lens, I think it starts helping to make those consistent decisions, because you're asking what helps to increase our cellular energy metabolism and what hinders that. And again, there's different contexts in which different things can promote or inhibit energy production, but that guiding principle is the same. Rather than dietary rules that are driven by sort of dogmatic beliefs, like don't eat any animal foods, or eat low carb, or they sort of just these blind rules, whereas his is more of a guiding principle, and that allows him to have that consistency, because that guiding principle is always going to be there. Even though he might test different parameters around that, it's still guided by that same underlying principle. And what I've started to notice is that a lot of health trends or a lot of health advice out there actually is energy inhibitive. So a lot of things I used to do for my health, which I thought were really healthy, like fasting and low carb and intense exercise, all these things that I thought I did for health, were actually inhibiting energy production. And if you go by that principle that energy and structure are interdependent at every level, that's why I started seeing degeneration in my physical health. And I think that's why a lot of these diet trends end up crashing, because they're not maintaining the integrity of their physical structure, because they're inhibiting that energy production. So when you start thinking it through that lens of how do I promote energy, how do I create an abundance of energy, because that supports my physical structure that I have to live with, and the better my physical structure, the more energy I can create. And so that loop continues, and that's such a completely different way of thinking about health than, like I said, these blind principles around, fast for a certain number of hours or restrict carbs below this point, which don't really have that guiding principle to them.
Yeah. One of the things that I thought of, because when I engaged with his stuff, a lot of it just made intuitive sense to me. So, that's why you buy into something when you read it or you see it, you're like, oh, right, yeah, like that, based off of the context that I've had, that makes sense to me. And one of the things was, I also did some energy inhibiting things. And one of them was high intensity exercise 7 days a week, probably more than once a day, in the name of health, and this is healthy, and this is disciplined, and whatever else. And I had lots of random aches and pains and seeing the physio and all that, but the world is telling me this is healthy, so that's what I keep doing. And when I read his work on like certain exercises can be stressful, at certain times it can be stressful for you, fasted exercise is stressful, I kind of thought about it, and I was like, yeah, because one of the things is when you're sick, someone always tells you, like, don't exercise, like, don't go for a run, don't do a high intensity gym class. And then what made sense to me was, if it's not healthy when I'm sick, why is it healthy when I'm not sick? Like, it's obviously then taking something from me. If it's something I'm not supposed to be doing when I'm in a compromised state, then how can I say that it's a truly healthy thing to be doing? So again, in context, but that made so much sense to me, that it was stressful rather than being the super healthy thing I thought it was, if it's not a good idea to do it when I'm sick and compromised.
That's such a good example. I also have had those reflections thinking, how did I ever think that was healthy? And in the moment, yeah, I felt so proud of myself. I felt disciplined,
Push through.
pushed through, and just realizing that you're completely going against your body. And I think that's another a huge thing I've taken from Dr. Ray Peat's work, is that you can work with your body to find health. You don't have to work against your body. Health isn't about
Yeah.
beating your body into submission. Health is actually about working with your body, listening to your body, following what actually really feels good. That's how you find health. You don't find health by going completely against all your body's signals and feeling like, oh, I have excellent discipline because I can ignore everything my body is telling me.
I'm going to push my body into health.
Yeah, I'm going to punish my body into health. That just actually makes no sense. But I think that's the mentality of so many diet and health trends. So that's another way that his work has completely shifted my approach to health.
And for sure, and even with something like restrictive eating, again, like, I did that because that's what people tell you is healthy, and people used to equate like being thin with healthy, and if you restrict eating, then sometimes that can result in like being like physically smaller. But if you read his things on hormonal health, it makes so much sense that women need like that fuel. We need that fuel for our body to want to reproduce and to care for an infant. And that all ties into your hormonal health, whether you choose to reproduce or care for an infant or not. Like, it makes so much sense that if I restrict, it might inhibit my ability to feed an infant or to reproduce in any kind of way. So as soon as you read that stuff and you're just like, it's not even like a light bulb of new information, it's just shining a light on something I intuitively kind of understood, but then the mainstream health told me otherwise, so I ignored my intuition.
But exactly, and I think what I used to think is that my health was defined by how lean I was. That was sort of my guiding principle for so long. And
Yeah.
looking back, I just realized how destructive that was to my health. And yeah, now after following his advice, I mean, I'm not by any means overweight, but I have allowed myself to pick up weight and pick up body fat to a place where my body is thriving. But if I had gone on my old ways of thinking, I would have thought, oh my word, I need to tighten up, I need to restrict, I need to lose some weight. And it's just a complete mindset shift.
Yeah. Again, not going to go into the technical details, but I think in Kate Deering's book and in The Fifth Vital Sign, I think they do cite actual studies that it may be more beneficial to women's hormonal health to be overweight rather than to be underweight. Yet when we talk about health, the focus is so often on don't be a certain size, like don't weigh a certain amount for your size or whatever, when there is clear studies showing difference. And I feel physically better when I'm allowing my body to be at a weight that it thinks is optimal for my functioning, one where I don't have to restrict, I don't have to exercise every day to maintain it. Like, it's like my body feels like this is the good size for me to be at.
Yeah, and I think Kate Deering's book does such a good job of helping us understand what is health. And she has a few key pointers to look out for, signs that your metabolism is in a good place. And, those are things like having good energy all day long, having a stable mood, having deep sleep, having clear skin, thick hair, strong nails, having libido, having hunger, those type of things, having a regular menstrual cycle, and a pain-free menstrual cycle. And those are so much better markers of health than simply looking at your weight or one single biomarker that you're chasing. It's so much more holistic to look at all those markers of a thriving metabolism, and where you meet all those things, whatever weight that is for you, that's probably your healthy weight, instead of
Yeah.
obsessing over some number to get you to a certain weight.
Yeah. And just for context, the reason why we discuss Kate Deering's book is because she cites a lot of Ray Peat's work, and he's had a big influence on the way on a lot of the things in her book. And when people ask me actually about where can they learn more about the pro-metabolic approach or Ray Peat's work, I often recommend her book because I think she did a really great job of taking a lot of what he writes in the form of articles, which will be very topic specific, very obviously not for someone like you, but for someone like me, sometimes a little bit too technical for what I would want to derive from it. And I find that Kate Deering's book did a wonderful job of taking a lot of his articles and a lot of his work and packaging it in a very easy to read way for someone like me who's not all that interested in being a nutritional expert or a health expert, but rather I just want to be healthy myself and make healthy choices for myself.
Yeah, her book is also a resource that I recommend so often. And I think, like you said, it's a good way of putting a lot of his work into easy to understand terms.
Yeah. Okay. On that note, I was thinking, even though we did speak about like looking at the body holistically and looking at health holistically, I was thinking it might be fun if we just pinpointed some very specific changes that we made in terms of our health and well-being as a result or a direct result of Dr. Ray Peat's work. We can like do them one at a time if you want to, because we might have some overlapping ones. So anyway, you want to go first?
Okay, I'll give one. So a huge change for me, specific change, was tracking my temperature and pulse. And it seems like such a simple thing to do. Can your temperature and pulse really tell you so much? But there's so much value and so much insight there. And again, how that differs from a lot of different diet and wellness trends is that it's giving you a biomarker to see how your changes are actually impacting your health. And tracking my temp and pulse has been a huge insight for me, just helping me to adjust the foods I'm eating to optimize my health and keep track of my progress and be aware of what is maybe hindering my metabolism. I think just learning to track your temp and pulse has been quite a game changer for me.
So that one is on my list. But I specifically wrote that I was tracking my temperature as a contraceptive already and as a way to understand my menstrual cycle, but not in terms of physical health, more in terms of the mood swings that I was having. But a main reason was contraceptive. So when I came across Dr. Ray Peat's work was the first time I started looking at it as an indicator of my health and not just like, oh, okay, this is the time I can't get pregnant. It was it was something I was already doing that then became an indicator of my health. I must admit, like I've never been all that consistent with taking my pulses, but Ian does. And I think that it is very beneficial to have those markers. And it's such an easy, free way to get feedback on how your body is doing. And again, good resources for that would be the fifth vital sign and taking charge of your fertility to discuss in terms of your temperature chart, if you're seeing certain things, what that might be an indicator of. So I'm just going to link that down below for anyone who's interested in that as well. Okay, number 2.
I'd say a huge one for me was to stop fearing sugar. I followed like a very low carb approach for many years, most of my 20s, and I genuinely feared sugar. I had this idea that sugar was poison, absolute poison, and if I ingested poison, I was doing my body harm. And it was such a mindset shift, and it took me a long time to really wrap my head around it and feel okay with eating sugar. But just understanding the importance of sugar. And that's not to say that I go and eat bags of white processed sugar. Most of my sugars I'm getting in the forms of fruit, honey, root vegetables, things like that, with a lot of vitamins and minerals in them as well. But I mean, occasionally having pure sugar, I also am not afraid of anymore. And I understand how supportive that is of my health. Again, I mean, we're not going to get into the details of the biology around that now, but it's been such a mindset shift and such a relief to know that I can just give my body the thing that it craves most and not feel guilty about it.
So that's not on my list, but it probably should have been, because growing up, my parents, they tried so hard to get me to eat veg. Like they really tried. And it was awful for everybody involved. It was just like not happening. So they would just, give me fruit instead to get me to eat nutritional food, because come high or low, they could not get me as a child to eat vegetables. And it's not a discipline thing. Like I would literally rather sit there and cry than eat the veg. And as an adult, obviously the world told me eating veg was healthy. So, stuff that down, make sure I got it in, blah, blah, blah. But it was such a relief to be like, oh, wow, I can get my nutrients from fruit, because I really don't like eating veg. And fruit was so demonized with the sugars and whatever, but there's like so much nutritional value in different types of fruit that I was like, oh, this makes sense for what my body loves to eat. And then I eat veg in like a different way. Again, not going to get into the technical details. So there's still that component, but it was just like a major relief to be like, I don't have to like tell my body, no, this thing that you're craving is bad, because I absolutely love fruit. Love most types of fruit. Can eat fruit all day long.
And again, yeah, it's coming back down to maybe your cravings are a very intelligent way of your body communicating with you.
Right. And it's my body is telling me it loves fruit. And like, again, I'm not stuffing my face on like a bag of white sugar. I'm just eating like a really big bag of strawberries or whatever.
So another one I had on my list is similar, but with dairy. So also for a long time, I thought dairy was causing all my health issues, especially in the hormone health world. Most of the advice you hear is to give up dairy from all sorts of practitioners. And I think the idea is that it's high in hormones, and that it's inflammatory, and that can cause a lot of health issues. And so dairy was also something that I craved. I mean, as a little girl, I would down glasses of milk. I absolutely loved milk. And then when I started following more of a paleo style approach, I was like, oh, well, our ancestors didn't have dairy, so therefore we didn't, I shouldn't be having dairy. And I tried for a long time to give up dairy, and I would have almond milk and coconut milk and all these things. And also it was just such a relief to start including dairy in my diet and just realize how good my body felt on it. I'm getting all these bioavailable nutrients, I'm satisfying that craving, and just to know that that's actually supporting my health. It's not hindering my health, it's supporting my health. This thing, again, that I naturally crave, that I naturally love, is good for my body. I don't have to feel ashamed of wanting this food. And again, it's such a relief.
It's a big one. So that one's not part of mine, because I grew up on a farm. So the dairy I had as a child sort of came right out of the cow that morning, like half an hour before I had it. But it was so beautiful, because I've never had issues digesting dairy. Whenever people are like, oh, you have an acne spot, like maybe you should cut out dairy. And I'm like, no, because I've had dairy my whole life and I don't have acne every single day of my life. So if it was the dairy, then like I would have it all the time. So I've never had issues digesting dairy. I've never had any like kind of direct anything from dairy. And it was so beautiful to read around the quality of the dairy that you're having. Because I had, for the most part of my life, except the little stint I did as a teenager in Dubai, but I had really good quality dairy, because growing up on a farm, that's what you had, like great fresh dairy. So no, that's also amazing, because it's one of those things that is like so demonized. And if your body is craving it and you don't have any side effects from having it, then amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Do you want to do your next one?
So another one for me is, I've already mentioned this, but to allow a higher body weight and higher body fat percentage. So as I mentioned, for years I chased being lean, and it was always a constant battle, restricting, exercising, but I thought I was doing all the right things. And when I started following the repeat approach, I did put on 10 kgs, which is a lot. I'm by no means overweight. Like I am not overweight, and it just shows that 10 kgs, I mean, my body needed that. I didn't get fat. I just filled out, in places like my hips and my bum and my thighs just started filling out where they naturally should be. And it was firstly, it's such a relief, because now I don't feel like I need to restrict and I can maintain this weight. And secondly, to understand how crucial that weight is for female hormone health. Like you mentioned, supporting a growing baby, feeding a baby, that's ultimately what our hormones are designed to do. And it's just, it's such a relief to know again that I don't have to restrict to have a healthy body. This is my healthy body, and having a slightly higher body fat percentage is healthy. It's not something that I should try and work against.
Yeah, and I think that his influence, I don't know if specifically it was him, but we are seeing a trend in terms of people pushing back against using weight as like a primary metric for your health. And we're seeing that a lot of people, I mean, there's a book, I'm not going to quote it now because I'd have to say a word that YouTube might not like me saying, but I'll link it down below, where she discusses like throwing out the diets and throwing out the restriction and throwing out the obsession with weight, leading to being more healthy. Because then you start focusing on other metrics. You start focusing more on how do I feel? Like, what is my body telling me rather than what does my body look like? And I think that mental shift is very helpful. Again, that was not one of mine, but I think that is a really, really valuable one for people to incorporate.
So I think that's mine. Do you want to give the rest of yours?
Okay, I'll give the rest of mine. One of the big ones for me, we discussed it at the beginning of the video, was to understand that certain ways of doing exercise and certain exercise is more stressful than beneficial for me. And I used to force myself to exercise in certain ways. And I used to spend a lot of money at the physio, like kind of repairing damage that I was doing in the name of health. And like through every phase of my menstrual cycle, doing like really high intensity exercise and doing exercise that really didn't feel all that natural to me, but society or mainstream health was telling me was natural. So to have that understanding that moving my body in a quality way is healthy. Getting my body to move, focusing on how my body moves, focusing on where I am in my cycle and how to move with that. That was really, that just like it just made such a big difference. And now when I go to physio, I go purely for added benefits. I don't go anymore because I have aches and pains. I don't go anymore because of, injuries or any of that stuff. And that's just because from his influence, move in a way that honors my body as opposed to a way that's stressful.
Yeah, that's a good one. That would probably be the next one on my list as well, because I've completely changed my approach to exercise. I think we're very similar in the sense that we really felt like punishing your body was a badge of honor. And and what I'm really enjoying now is that because I took quite a break from exercise when I started focusing on my hormone health, just because I didn't want to put that stress on my body. I still move a lot. I'm a naturally active person, so I walk a lot and move a lot. But now I've started focusing a little bit more on building strength again, but to approach it in a completely different way. It's not about how many calories I can burn or to look a certain way. I'm approaching strength from more of a functional point of view, to say I want to be able to participate in life and do the things that I love to do in life. And it's such a relief to approach exercise in that way, in a way that supports your body and doesn't go against your body.
Literally for me, it's about I want to feel physically good and strong. And the last movement stuff that I've been doing was how to move with my pregnant body changing. And it was all about like how to move in a way that supports the changes that my body is going through, as well as things that are to come. And that mindset would not have been there without the influence of Dr. Ray Peat's work, reminding us that it's not about being stressful with your body. Okay, on to my next one, which I think is such a popular one in the pro-metabolic world, but as someone who has had digestive issues in the past and has not had digestive issues for now like 3 to 4 years, is the raw carrot salad. So I don't know if you briefly want to explain like just very quick, like why the raw carrot salad? and then I'll talk a little bit more about like why it excites
Yeah, so the raw carrot salad is so carrots are naturally antimicrobial. So if you've ever noticed, a carrot will last forever before it really goes off, and that's because it has that natural antimicrobial properties. And so when we eat a carrot, especially when you have it in that form where you grate those long strips, it
me.
has this action of sort of sweeping out your gut, and drawing in a lot of or attaching to the toxins and endotoxins in your gut and helping to remove them. And so it's such a simple concept, a raw carrot salad, but it's so effective at helping to clear out endotoxin in the gut. It also helps your body to detox excess estrogen. With the combination of the coconut oil and apple cider vinegar, that just enhances that action because coconut oil is also antimicrobial. And so if you have that daily, it's just a good way to clear out any funnies in your gut, help keep that gut bacteria healthy, and remove the buildup of endotoxins, because it's that buildup of endotoxins that can contribute to many health issues that we see.
Thank you for that explanation. I would have not been able to do it justice. What I have experienced in my health journey is having gone from someone who had not consistent digestion at all. It was consistently terrible. That was probably the only consistency there. Is to now it is very consistent. It is a metric that I use to determine like where I'm at with my health. And I think like whenever it feels even slightly off, I just up my raw carrot salad, and it usually just brings things right back into a consistency that works for me. To not get too technical about that stuff that people might not want to hear about on the internet. Okay, so the other one I don't think we have to talk about, but it's on my list. And the reason we don't have to talk about it is because we did a whole episode on it, is obviously the incorporation of Progest E. But what I wrote down here was more the influence of understanding just how beneficial progesterone is to my health, and therefore that I really prioritized having good ovulation. And good ovulation in a time where I was not trying to conceive. For a long time, when I was actively avoiding conception, it was still vitally important to me to make sure that I reduced the stress in my follicular phase leading up to ovulation, supporting like having a good luteal phase. Obviously, you support it before the time because it's based off of your ovulation. And that influence came from Dr. Ray Peat, is to really care about ovulating. Because before I was like, okay, who really cares if I ovulate or not? Like, if you don't want to have a baby, why should I be ovulating? And his influence led to me caring a lot about whether I ovulate or not.
And just to tie that into the checking your temperature, you said you noticed when you started on the progesterone that your whole temperature graph shifted up, indicating that your metabolism had improved. And that, again, is one of the sort of fundamental takeaways from Dr. Ray Peat's work, is that we need a warm body for optimal function. As soon as our body's temperature starts declining, it's as if our body is going into hibernation. Everything is slowing down, trying to conserve energy. So your digestion slows, your blood flow slows, everything's slowing down, trying to conserve energy. And so when we take our temperatures and you're consistently noticing these low temperatures, I mean, often I've seen people whose temperatures are sitting at like 35.8, 35.9, and they're experiencing all these issues. And it's just so clear when you understand that we need a warm body to thrive, for all those processes to function optimally. And so I think that's one of the key takeaways from his work from me, is prioritize a warm thriving body, and take a dip in temperature as an indication that something is probably off.
Yeah, I love that. And then the final one that was not on my list, but while we were talking, I thought like I might as well mention it, which would be the orange juice, which is commonly referred to as like the adrenal cocktail in the pro-metabolic world. I've always loved orange juice, so this was a very easy incorporation for me, and that's probably why you see it in all my videos, because we are filming this in my morning. So I typically do have at least one of the adrenal cocktails every single morning as a result of the influence of Dr. Ray.
Yeah, exactly. And that took quite a lot for me. I think I only implemented the orange juice much, much later because I still had
I was
this.
like, the first day, I was like, yes, I can get on board. I love orange juice. Okay,
I
sorry, go.
I still had this perception that orange juice is as bad as soda because it's just sugar,
Right,
just
yeah.
empty calories. And when you realize orange juice is a great source of potassium, of magnesium, of vitamin C, of flavonoids, of all these things that are so supportive of our health, it just
Yeah.
it's a complete mindset shift.
No, for sure. And that is the end of my list. Was there anything else that you wanted to add as sort of anything that you feel that you'd like to say about Dr. Ray Peat and the influence of his work before we end off today's discussion? Anything that comes to mind?
I think just one thing that comes to mind is it's actually one of his articles that's probably my favorite article, and it's called Intelligence and Metabolism, and it just yeah, it talks about how, we tend to think of intelligence as genetic. You're born with
Yeah.
a certain level of intelligence. And in the article, he describes that the environment in which a child is allowed to develop really
Mm.
influences their intelligence. And not just a child, but, as day to day, our environment, our stress can influence the way we think and the way we process things. And
Yeah.
I must say that's also a huge thing I've noticed in myself is just my cognition seems to have improved tremendously since implementing his principles. And I think that's again, coming back to that how I started with, you cannot address your health in parts. It's just so interesting to see the far reaching effects of sort of some simple dietary changes, but when you support the whole system, how every aspect of your functioning starts improving. And I think
Yeah.
it's just such an incredible way to understand our bodies through that lens. So yeah, I thought that's just a good additional insight.
I love that. Sorry for my distraction. I just had to move my next meeting quickly just so that we could do justice to finishing that off. I think that's really valuable. And if we can think of any other resources or articles or anything that we think is worth linking in the description below for people, we will do that. We'll obviously include all the ones that we spoke of in this video, as well as any other additional ones that we can think of. And I guess this is definitely not going to be the last time you hear us talking about Dr. Ray Peat. Today, we just kind of wanted to talk about his influence and not so much the technical details, but maybe in other videos, we will address some of the technical things, because maybe for someone else watching this video, it might be the first time they're hearing things like, the sugar, the orange juice, the raw carrot salads, the everything that you and I are so familiar with, that we can definitely unpack, probably you more than me, for people just a little bit more to understand why we decided to incorporate those things and why we decided that they contribute to our health journey, as opposed to being the negatives that they sometimes get posed as. Yeah, that is everything from my side. If I just had to say my favorite Dr. Ray Peat resource is the obvious one, so I don't have to talk a lot about it, and that's his book, From PMS to Menopause. That's the one that I've read. That's the one that I often refer back to when I want to look up different things. It is written in the form of like kind of articles put together. So it is quite nice to just like keep a printed out version of it with like sticky notes or whatever and refer back to things that I might want a refresher on. But yeah, that would be my favorite resource from him.
Thanks so much, Common, and I'm glad that we got to do this and pay tribute to Dr. Ray Peat's work.
Me too. Thank you for everybody that joined us. Thank you, Jackie, again for a wonderful discussion. I'm looking forward to our next one already. And just a reminder to comment down below what you'd like to see us talk about, what discussions you'd like us to have. If there's anything in this video that you might want us to expand on, or just, give a little bit more meat to. We are going to carry on having these discussions because we enjoy having them, and we hope that you find them interesting and that you find them valuable, but we'd also like to hear from you. So thanks for joining us, and thank you again, Jackie.
Thanks, Common.